so much for joining us today. My name is Vicki Townsend, and I'm the founder and president of Divorce Right. And we provide managerial training for HR professionals and company supervisors so that you can recognize divorce in your employees and get them the immediate support that they need. And we provide divorce coaching and case management, providing the care and guidance and direction that your divorcing employees so desperately need. Divorce is a huge disruptor, not only to the employee going through it, but to the company they work for. Our mediators and coaches have a unique 360-degree perspective of the divorce puzzle, and they have a deep understanding of the legal, financial, and emotional aspects of divorce, and they can handle even the highest conflict of cases with compassion and professionalism. Our mediators and coaches are trained to look at the entire picture, helping your employees make good decisions based on their goals and expectations, and we give them hope for a better future. Even if you have a current legal plan in place for your employees, that's not enough to support them through divorce and maybe even making things work. So reach out to us today to see if adding our suite of services is a good fit for your company. So if you're an HR benefits manager, total rewards, HR benefits provider, and consultant, please reach out and we will get you on the calendar to make sure that you understand the impact on your company and the value of adding the services of Divorce Right can add to your company. And today we're going to be talking about our first responders and the sacrifices that they make that impact their marriages with Father Ron Perkins, my friend and colleague now. Father Ronald Perkins has been a public safety chaplain since 2009 and has completed numerous educational programs via the Federation of Fire Chaplains and International Conference of Police Chaplains. Father Ron was awarded the 2021 National Chaplain of the Year by the Federation of Fire Chaplains and a Distinguished Service Award in 2023. The Fire Chiefs Association of Broward County awarded him the Ralph Marison EMS Lifetime Achievement Award in June of 2023. He has extensive experience in education and workplace chaplaincy, critical incident stress management, and crisis negotiation. Father Ron has served as a chaplain at Fort Lauderdale Police Department since 2009 and Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue since 2012, as well as Coral Springs, Parkland Fire since 2017, and Tamarack Fire since 2021. He has over 4,000 hours in the field with fire rescue and law enforcement personnel. Father Ron also serves on the Broward County Critical Incident Stress Management Team, as well as area health and safety committees within the departments he supports. Father Ron is ordained as an Orthodox Catholic deacon in 2009 and to the priesthood in 2011. In 2016, Father Perkins formed a nonprofit organization, Public Safety Chaplaincy, Inc., to provide chaplain consultant and management services to public safety departments. Thank you so much, Ron. You've been such a dear friend, a champion for first responders, and personally, you have changed my life and understanding around the special needs that our first responders have around their relationships. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you, Vicki, for inviting me to be here and talk about a subject that's obviously very important in my life, and that's our first responders, our law enforcement officers, firefighters, EMS workers, dispatchers, and the like, who every day go out there and risk their lives so we can be safe.
You know, Ron, as a tax-paying citizen, I'm guilty. I didn't understand the impact that these emergency calls that they go on that we just take for granted that they have on their private lives. And I want to shed some light on this so that our viewers can understand more about the personal sacrifices that they make for us. So let's talk about the things that contribute to that. You know, you get a lot of calls as a chaplain. What percentage of those calls are about their marriage or their relationship with a significant other?
My scope of responsibility within Broward County is about 8,000 lives, counting our active duty uniformed personnel as our retirees and their immediate families. And I probably have a one-on-one interaction with about 300 of those people every month. And at least 50% of the issues that they raise and want to talk to a chaplain, or ultimately I end up referring to professional counseling, has to do with their home life, has to do with relationships with others, whether it be with their peers, subordinates, bosses at work, or on the home side. And certainly COVID has not helped the
Right.
situation at home, because there's a lot more stress. There certainly was during the isolations and so forth, when the kids were all home and their spouses had to work from home and the like. Well, they still had to go to work and be
Right.
exposed to the general public. So that caused a lot more stress. But I would say about 50% of calls for service for a chaplain have to do with the relationships,
Wow.
without a doubt.
Well, research shows that first responders experience divorce at much higher rates, somewhere between 60 and 75%. So, as a chaplain, is that what you're seeing too?
I definitely think so. And to kind of put it into perspective, if you look at our lives as civilians that
Mhm.
are not in law enforcement or fire or in emergency services, public safety situation, we will experience somewhere between 3 and 5 life impacting events in our entire lifetime. The
Right.
loss of a loved one, a parent, a child, a divorce, a bankruptcy, a job loss, an act of violence to themselves or a loved one. A police officer or a firefighter can see 3 to 5 of those events on a 12 to 24-hour shift.
Right.
Every day, they're exposed to that kind of stress in the community, in the people that they serve. And that wears on you. So, yes, we see a great increase in stress, all the way to post-traumatic stress disorders, which is actually a relatively rare disease, but certainly post-traumatic stress that they live with constantly. So it's a day-to-day situation.
Well, our first responders fall into some categories that really put them at risk for relationships. And this is not just in the emergency, the first responders category, but some things that increase your risk of divorce is shift work. And we
Yes,
all know, right, that these guys and women are doing shift work all the time. And in the case of firefighters, it's inconsistent shift work. It's not every Monday, every Thursday, and every Saturday, right?
yes. They typically, in the United States, they typically work 24-hour shifts. They go to an alternate home, essentially. Their firehouse, turn my phone off here. Their firehouse is their second home, and they
Right.
have a work family and a home family, and that causes issues too, obviously, in a relationship. But firefighters are typically on for 24, off for 48, and on the police side, they're typically working 10 to 12-hour shifts, 4 shifts a week. So they're gone from home at least half the time. And we mentioned divorce, and I know that's a subject close to your heart, and
Right.
has become one close to mine too, as we've built our relationship and seen what your organization can do for our first responders in a positive way. But the level of stress leads to not only suicide, but unfortunately a lot of addictive practices and suicide. People don't know this, but more police officers and firefighters complete suicide, die by their own hand, than are killed in the line of duty, which is a scary, scary number.
It is.
And we think only about 40% of suicides in the nation, whether it be law enforcement or civilians, are actually reported out post-mortem as suicides. So the number is probably even higher. Now, the good news is, through very aggressive education and suicide prevention programs, we've been able to decrease those numbers in police and fire substantially over the last 4 or 5 years. But the number still exceeds, the suicide numbers still exceed line of duty deaths. And
You know,
that is,
yeah.
that's sad. That's a
And
shame.
it is. And I want to kind of just give like just an anecdotal story to that. Although I have heard, you know, since with you and some of the guys in Broward County, I've heard some of the most horrific stories I've ever heard in my life from what these people experience. But in my own case, and this is what now I'm frustrated about. Before I didn't know about, right? When my mother was still alive, we were at her home. She had gotten up at 5 o'clock in the morning. She was very confused. And she thought she was going to go out. She thought my brother had come home. It was Mother's Day weekend. And she didn't use her walker and she fell. And unbeknownst to me, she had broken her neck, but I didn't know that at the time. I picked her up and I put her back in bed. And then I just barely touched her hair and she screamed. And I said, oh gosh. So I called, 911. They came immediately. And I recognize now that those guys were dealing with a woman at the end of her life that they recognized, when I explained to them what happened and you could see the fall on her nose, the scrape on her nose, that they understood what was going on. And just that trauma to them, I'd never considered the impact of that trauma on them. And I won't go into the gory details of the gentleman that I've been working with that was cleaning up an accident, a very horrific accident on I-95 in South Florida. And what he had to do to get things out of the road were things that a movie cannot, a Stephen King novel doesn't throw the right light on. It was that bad. And yet to him, that was just his job. And I can't imagine that he had to go home that night and be daddy, right? Or have date night. So let's talk about those kinds of things and, how that impacts their home life. And then more importantly, what can we, and I know what you do. So I want to talk about that too, but what can we as taxpayers, is there anything that we can do to support them other than, gosh, thank you for your service. That seems a little trite and not enough. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the biggest thing that taxpaying citizens in communities can do is to learn what resources are available in their community to first responders from a emotional, mental, and spiritual health perspective. Because not every department is frankly as developed as many of us in Broward County are with what's called BHAP programs or behavioral health access programs, where we take chaplaincy, culturally aware clinicians, critical incident stress management debriefers, and peer supporters, all individually trained in the skill of listening and referral to higher levels of care as appropriate of their peer members, their uniformed and civilian employees in the departments, and get them to an appropriate level of emotional, spiritual, and physical health, and counseling and services. And in Broward County, we have very sophisticated, integrated behavioral health access program models, and cities will support that. We have a police psychologist, as an example, full-time, and getting a second one for the city of Fort Lauderdale. We have critical incident stress management teams. We have chaplains. We have clinicians who have had special training in how firefighters and police officers are exposed to trauma and exposed to the stresses, and then what to do about it. We actually put them in bunker gear and send them into a fake smoke environment, stage smoke kind of thing, and have them experience what a firefighter goes through. We have them participate in mock traffic stops, domestic abuse situations. So they know the level of stress that the men and women that are serving them and protecting them go through on a daily basis. So those are all things the cities can do, but it costs money to do that.
It does.
And so citizens supporting appropriate funding levels for law enforcement and fire and EMS and dispatch centers. Dispatchers are our first responders. When you call 911, you want the phone answered quickly and correctly, and the right questions asked. And as they're asking that, they're dispatching resources to you. And that's a group of people, frankly, that a lot of departments don't think about. But they're exposed to it right raw with a 911 caller.
Trauma,
They
trauma,
don't
trauma,
see it,
trauma.
but they hear it. They hear the gunshots. They hear the crying, the screaming in multiple languages, and they've got to deal with it. And they seldom have closure because they don't go on scene, and
Right.
nobody thinks, oh, well, let me let the dispatcher know this 2-year-old drowning victim we saved.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we do in our model here is be sure that when we respond to a critical incident and that requires a defusing or a debrief, we either ask the dispatchers to participate or we follow up by going out and visiting with them and saying, hey, this child lived. And it was because of what you said on the phone and the timeliness that you got EMS and police there saved that kid's life.
You just, again, just opened my eyes to another department that I had not even considered, and those are our 911.
Yeah.
Oh my, talk about trauma and stress. So we talked about that, the things that knock them into a higher risk category. So that first one was shift work. The second one is high stress and trauma.
Right.
And these, these people, I mean, I have become this this advocate, and I've been sharing the word about, what the people, how not only the sacrifices that they made, but that they're not compensated nearly enough. We
Right.
say that about our teachers, but we don't consider what these people go through. So high stress and trauma, that is another indicator of puts you automatically into a higher risk environment for divorce. So already, just because of their careers, just shift work and high stress and trauma. And then we talked about the fact that, they do have two families. And I've been able to see that in action as I go to the fire stations, and it's actually a very cool thing. I see a very much a fraternity like culture, but sometimes that can be a real interference because it's, there's no diapers to change, there's no yards to mow, there's no, ballet recitals to attend to, there's no pool pumps to fix, right? So talk about how being away from their families for those 24 hours
Well,
impacts.
it's certainly stressful on the spouse that's left behind
Yeah.
because it's like it's a 24-hour deployment. It's as though somebody went to Afghanistan for 12 months, only it's 24 hours. But that's when everything breaks, or the yard needs mowing, or the child gets sick, or you're missing a ball game or a recital or
Right.
something. And then they come home the next morning, they've run 20, 25 calls. They've slept maybe 2 hours overnight. They've had a pediatric code. They've had a horrific traffic accident, a multi-casualty situation. Somebody jumped off the roof of a building downtown. I mean, all these things happen, and they go home, and when they walk in the door and the wife or the husband says, how was your shift, honey? The last thing they want to do at that point is relive their shift.
Right.
So
Or she or he or she's been with the babies, right?
Yeah.
3 kids under 5 and says, here, take them,
They're all yours now. That really, really happened a lot during COVID because mom or dad at home had to go to work now, and they've had these kids and they've been either healthy or not. And dad walks in the door, the firefighter walks in the door, the wife says, here are the kids. I'm going to the bedroom to my office and start work, or I just need a break. And meanwhile, they've run the 20 calls, they're exhausted, they didn't get any sleep, they've had the high stress incidents, and now they've got 3 screaming kids, and they've got to deal with them and fix the hot water heater and mow the lawn and
mow the lawn.
they're not off to go fishing or play golf.
And they're still trying to decompress, right? They're still trying to process that they just pulled a child out of the bottom of a swimming pool.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So that's the kind of stuff I didn't know, Ron. That's the kind of stuff that as a taxpayer, it just went, I never, even when we've all been past horrific accidents on I-95, and maybe you've even been in one yourself. where there is a lot of stuff going on, and clearly some people made it. I'm sure you've seen um, car accidents where you sit there and go, that person didn't make it. And then you keep driving.
Right.
They don't get to keep driving. They are the ones that have to clean that up. And then they have to go home and be daddy
Right.
or mommy, right? So what are some things that you can recommend that they can do to maybe preserve their marriages? What's some of the advice you give?
I actually teach a program on how to live with a firefighter.
Ah,
And one of the first things is make an agreement during your marriage, or whether you do premarital or after marital counseling, which I highly recommend.
mhm.
Is when someone is going to become a firefighter or a law enforcement officer, have some ground rules, so that when you come home, you know what to ask, you know what not to ask. You get to gauge the level of stress that the first responder has experienced in their shift, and not expect them to give you an immediate replay. And there's some things, frankly, they're never going to tell you. They're not going to tell you what that person looked like at Surfside that now we pulled out 4 days after the building collapsed. They're
Right.
not going to describe the condition of the remains that they've had to dig out of this fallen building and attempt to identify and put back together. You don't want them to either, but you have to have that kind of negotiation up front as to what is appropriate to share, what you want shared, what the spouse wants to hear. That's number one. Number two is to educate the spouse. Actually, we at the last week of recruit training, when we bring in a new recruit class, we've got 19 young people right now that will be graduating out of our recruit class next week. And the last day of the recruit class, we bring their families in, their wives, their parents, their older children. We set them down, we feed them dinner, we give them a little demonstration, we show some training videos and so forth, and we talk about these subjects. Now that your son, your husband, your wife is going to be a firefighter, here are some things you can do to make his or her life easier, and frankly, your life easier in terms of long-term stress management. And there's all kinds of classes that we do for that, and the counseling capabilities, again, of the entire team, the peer support, the chaplain, the clinician, and CISM, critical incident stress management debriefs, where it's indicated, continues throughout their career.
Yeah, yeah. So I love that you guys are proactive um, about this very issue, and I'm hoping that more and more police officers and firefighters and EMS around the country adopt that kind of commitment to helping them, preserve their marriages. But I don't know if you're aware of this, Ron, if I've shared this with you, but for the first time since 1960, divorce rates are going up. I don't know if you're feeling that in the field and in where you are, just because there's probably so many that are. But you know, as a man of faith, what do you do, or what do you recommend when their marriages comes to an end, where they've fought the good fight, they've done what they've needed to do? What are your thoughts as a man of faith on that?
Well, we are brought up to believe that marriage is forever, and it's a covenant between the couple and God. That said, it's even in the Bible, it's in Holy Scripture, in all the scriptures, Old Testament, New Testament, that divorce happens, and there are ways to deal with it from a religious perspective. I think that it is better to disengage if it has reached a unsoluble situation. It may be the best solution to divorce, to separate, to move on from that relationship. It might be the healthiest thing to do, including spiritually and emotionally, to move on. So what we work closely with people who are divorcing on is the emotional aspects of the divorce. We make referrals to organizations such as yours, and right now I know you're working some cases
We are.
locally that have made your involvement has had a major impact, not only on the finances of the individual that's saving, frankly, a lot of money, but more importantly, in what I do, saving a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
It is helping them understand through your counseling level that this has to happen. This is just not a survivable situation. You've done the counseling. You've done the spiritual side. You've talked to your pastor or your rabbi or your imam,
Right.
and you've had the instruction and the counseling, and it's just not a lasting relationship. So now what do? And we try to separate in such a way that it does the least damage to everybody involved. Everybody worries about the children appropriately, but you got to worry about mom and dad too,
Right.
and the finances of this relationship breaking up, because we all know that divorce can be very, very costly financially, and many people end up going bankrupt over it.
Yeah.
And today, there's no reason to do that when you've got organizations like yours and professionals that understand how to do it in an economical way and less painful, not painless.
It's never going to be great, right? It's never going to be great, but it can be done in a kinder, gentler manner. You don't have to, don't have to hate each other and hurt each other to get out of a marriage that's no longer working. And because of the sacrifices that they make, they do experience. I mean, I've been to some of your firefighter stations where literally we were in a meeting, and one of the guys that was talking goes, he's on his second marriage, he's on his third marriage, he just got a divorce. I mean, it was like literally like a revolving door, and they have a low salary, but they do have a great pension. They do have that. But when you've gone through marriages, but what happens is that when you've gone through 2, 3, 4 divorces, sometimes what's left in your pension is not, it's not worth. That's why, you spend. I was talking to one of your guys last week, and he wants to do it, the kinder, gentler way that we like to do it. He goes, Vicki goes, my partner spent $40,000 on his side of the divorce. And he goes, I don't want to do that. I don't want that for my wife. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for our future, because that's just taking money out of our children's futures as well. We said, yes, that's what we want to do. So, but thank you. I appreciate the shout out to us for the work that we do. It has changed my life. It has changed how I feel about our public servants, but particularly our first responders, because I really recognize that the sacrifice is not just that they don't have the salary that they deserve, but it's so much more. And I hope that anybody that's watching this understands that as well. And I hope if you are watching this, if you are involved in any way with first responders, that you'll reach out to us, allow us to get in there and help your men and women make wiser, better decisions so that we can preserve some of their wealth, but most importantly, give them hope for the future so that they can come out of this and have some hope for what's the next stage of their life. So, Father Ron, thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you in just a couple of weeks down in Fort Lauderdale. And for everybody else, thank you so much for joining us. We will continue to bring you education around the divorce process, the impact on your employees, and how we can help you make a difference in their lives. For now, thank you so much. Ron, thanks so much for being with us today, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.